And behind me is longtime Reading resident and current director of the Northern California Veterans Museum, U.S. Navy Senior Chief. He served multiple tours in Iraq with the Seabees, Rob Burroughs.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for this humble opportunity to stand before you this morning on this solemn day in our American history. Today is truly a day for reflection and remembrance. As with every other American, I remember exactly where I was when the second plane, Flight 175, a Boeing 757, plunged into Tower 2 of the World Trade Center. When the words "America is under attack" came across the airwaves, I knew my life was about to change drastically forever. At that time, I had just been promoted to Chief Petty Officer in the United States Navy, a position of great responsibility in peacetime, let alone during wartime. But that morning, that responsibility became even more intense. I knew what our nation's military had to go through after the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, and now that responsibility was falling on men and women such as myself. My group of chiefs would come to be known as the 9/11 Chiefs, and that title alone brought intense responsibility. 1 year later, I would find myself in Kuwait preparing to cross the Iraqi border for Operation Enduring Freedom. I was deployed with the Navy Seabees and 1st Marine Expeditionary Forces forward to a base camp in northern Kuwait just south of the DMZ. The name of that tent city was Camp 93, Let's Roll. This camp was named for the heroic citizens who wrestled the terrorists to the ground in Pennsylvania. Those men and women who stepped up to the plate and courageously fought the terrorists, knowing full well the outcome. Camp 93 set the standard for my fellow troops and I, as we gathered our own courage to step across the border and begin a 10-year-long fight for our nation and the people of Iraq. Once again in 2006, I deployed again for Operation Iraqi Freedom as a convoy commander of a 25-man combat team. And again, we stepped our convoy off from Al Salim, Kuwait, on September 10th, 2006. As we traveled north into Iraq that night, we took our first enemy attack, and with heavy tracer fire at 0106, that's September 11th. As I watched my team come under enemy fire, I said to myself, here we go. No more training. We're in the fight. The next 8 months proved to be some of the most hostile enemy action of the war. The fight was on, and the responsibility was horrific at best. But I knew I was up to the task that was set before me. It was too late to quit, and too soon to go home. We mustered the courage in the face of death, and we pushed forward to do our tasking, just as those men and women did on that 9/11 day. Where does the strength come from to hurl men and women into the face of death, full knowing well what the consequences are? I found my strength in my God and in the men that I served with, and believing in my country, the United States of America. The terrorist attack on September 11th were more than attacks on American citizens and American property. They were attacks on freedom, on liberty, and on democracy. All that our forefathers and the generations before us have fought to protect. And while we could debate forever the similarities and differences between December 7th and September 11th, it is clear to me that this generation has the strength of will and fortitude to persevere. Whether it is the firefighters, police officers, and rescue workers who plunged into the burning World Trade Center to rescue others, or the airline passengers who wrestled United Airlines Flight 93 from the terrorists over the Pennsylvania countryside, or the Marines, sailors, airmen, and soldiers who continued to bring this fight to the Taliban and Al-Qaeda enemy in Afghanistan and Iraq at this very moment. Americans today, everyday citizens, are born of this same sense of sacrifice and spirit. President Ronald Reagan liked to call this the formidable will and moral courage of free men. It has always been this country's greatest asset, whether at Pearl Harbor or at Ground Zero, and it will always be. It is this legacy that we are here to reflect upon and to remember, and it is this legacy that inspires the men and women who served in our armed forces and police and fire forces today. The commemoration of the horrifying September 11th attacks serves as a time to remember those who were lost, cherish all that we have as Americans, and honor the men and women who are still fighting overseas every day to defend us. For the vast majority of us, the tragic events on September 11th are indelibly captured in our minds. We now live with the constant reminder of the evil and vindictive nature of these extremists. And we do so with every expectation that our government is doing all that it can to prevent future attacks upon the citizens of this great country of ours. We owe a debt of gratitude to those dedicated individuals who fought and sacrificed for the freedoms we as Americans cherish so dearly today. The faces and spirits we honor today remind us that the price of freedom and liberty are often paid through the horrors of war, that vigilance should never be lost, and that a lack of readiness exacts a heavy toll. We can use words such as sacrifice, selflessness, devotion, and courage. We can salute, honor, lay wreaths, and reflect. All these things are good and proper. We should do such things for honor and remembrance. Our hallmarks are of honoring those whose lives were taken away from them or irreparably harmed as they fought for America. But there too is another way in which we can remember them, by being ready to fight and defeat the forces of terrorism and repression at home as well as abroad. Today we must not forget the brave men and women stand the watch on the walls of our nation, protecting us. And they say, nothing's going to hurt you tonight, not on my watch. What does that have to do with remembrance? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we must remember, it's now our watch. It's our turn to stand on that wall, and readiness is the best remembrance we can give the police officers, the firemen, the innocent men and women, and the veterans who lost their lives that tragic 9/11 morning. It's not just the responsibility of our military, it's the responsibility of every American citizen. It is the most tangible thing we can give, the confidence to say these dead have not died in vain. You look at Afghanistan, or Iraq, or Yemen, the Philippines, the Horn of Africa, the skies over America, and the waters of the Middle East. And what do you see? You see young American men and women, many barely out of high school, ready, willing, and able to do the job because readiness is the best remembrance. Undoubtedly, right at this very moment, there's a soldier patrolling in Afghanistan. There's a sailor boarding an Iraqi ship in the Persian Gulf. There's a Marine ready for action in the Gulf of Aden. There's an airman patrolling the no-fly zone in Libya. And there's a Coast Guardsman monitoring shipping into the Boston Harbor or keeping a watchful eyes on the shores of the Great Lakes. They have joined and rejoined American military over the last 10 years. They have trained and retrained and trained some more to do their job, to be ready to do their job. And they're doing it well because they know readiness is the best remembrance. The United States is a nation, but I believe America is a notion, an idea, a set of principles. In the essence of America, the Constitution may be our brain, but the Declaration of Independence is our heart. The Declaration holds that we, the people, are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. That's you and I. 80 and several years after that document was signed, a man of Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois, President Abraham Lincoln, would see clearly that this declaration links the hearts of patriotic, liberty-loving men together. As long as the love of freedom exists in the minds of men throughout the world, and that love of freedom, the very notion upon which America is based, transcends borders, religions, and peoples. For once you get a taste of freedom, you never wish to give it up. But with this freedom comes responsibility. And part of that responsibility is to be ready to defend our freedom and to bring it to others. Freedom cannot be measured. If you give it to one, you don't have to take it away from another. It is bountiful and beautiful, multiple and infinite. In just this past 90-some years, who but America has the world called upon time and time again for leadership in solving global crises? World War I, World War II, the rebuilding of Europe and Asia, the Cold War, the Gulf War, Yugoslavia, and now the war on terrorism. The world craves true American leadership. But leadership is a grave responsibility, and true leaders are not always popular. So while some of our friends around the world scold us for facing facts about which they would rather bury their heads in the sand, your military is ready to act as those facts become all too apparent to everyone else. And what better way could we remember those who gave their lives 10 years ago today than being just that, ready? I hope you've been proud of what your military has done for you. I am proud to stand here with you today to remember those who have perished over the last 10 years for our freedoms, and the others who served since then by being ready to act on their behalf for the nation and for the good of our people. In the words of Joseph Drake to the defenders of New Orleans in 1814, "And they who fought for their country dies shall fill an honored grave, for glory lights the soldier's tomb, and beauty weeps the brave." Thank you very much for allowing me to share this day with you.
The Military and Public Safety Color Guard, once again, ladies and gentlemen.